Hi, I'm Roshan James, and I'm reading Fly by Martin Tarback. Oh, I can't explain what a simple-minded man would say, or what he might just find if he flew away. And I want to fly, but I just can't seem to find a way. Could you help me, please? 'Cause I'm trying. Maybe she's just a dream in my head. Maybe she's just a girl that I met. Maybe she's just the kind of a girl giving love to the rest of the world. Maybe I'm just a fool in the rain, hopeless enough to see what you say. Or maybe I'll just fly through the sky, never a dreamer, or wondering why. Oh, wouldn't you love it? Simple-minded man.
Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sarah Geidlinger.
And I'm Marshall Ward.
And I'm Joe Mancini, director of the Working Center. It's a project that Stephanie and myself have been part of since 1982. And, so really that really defines myself and our work and the kind of involvement we've had in community over these 40 years. And it's an evolving story. And so I'm really happy to share that story.
So, Joe, I think the only time I've been in your presence was at the St. John's Kitchen in 2009 in the spring for the memorial service for Martin Tarback. And you gave an incredible delivery of who Martin was, and his sister Carol Tarback was there as well. And also you read one of Martin's poems, which was one of the most beautiful things I ever read. I had to talk about how if he could fly, right? And can you kind of take us back to that? Because I thought you did such an incredible job of honoring Martin and all the people who supported Martin over the years.
Martin kind of turned out for the Working Center community to be, and the St. John's Kitchen community, just kind of emblematic of a human being who we knew as part of a community, but then got lost, literally lost in all kinds of mostly mental health kinds of things, where he really kind of clammed up and lived this life where people supported him on the street, but they didn't know him at all. And but something happened, and it was related to he was kind of charged because he was stealing pudding, but the real issue underneath was this kind of mental health. But underneath that was a cancer. And so the outreach workers made it such, and especially Tracy, they kind of set it up through the mental health court that he would get access to a doctor as part of his, okay, we're not going to put you in jail, but if you go see a doctor. And all of a sudden, literally in this case, the drugs opened him up, because it was helpful, like providing kind of a psychiatric drug to do something. I don't really know that part of the story, but fact is, he opened up. And in a sense, his heart opened up. He became kind of part of the community of people who were looking after him. Like, his cancer was so real, because it was only like 9 months till he died after that. And I don't know, everyone rallied around him, and he did a video about his experience, and so it just taught us that someone who seemed, I remember when we were constructing 43 Queen, he would be in the across the street at where ABC Surplus is. He would just be in that doorway, and you couldn't talk to him. Like, he was just sitting there. He'd sleep there. And like, there was no talking to him. It was like this presence. And all of a sudden now, this was like almost 10 years later, he was a person, and he was part of things, and he was free to do that. So yeah, it was a meaningful experience, and it's funny. I think those things do happen a lot, but Martin represented something just unique.
What was so powerful about that service for me was there was a slideshow of his life, really, in the early years, and I would say that his childhood, like the way he looked on the beach and in his rec room playing guitar, that looked a lot like my childhood and most of our childhoods, didn't it?
Yeah, very much. And interestingly, there's people who worked at the Working Center who lived with Martin in the early 1980s in the old Kaufman houses on Margaret Street. They were kind of like, I don't know, they're like hippie places, I guess. And Martin was part of that. Like he was playing his instruments and living in kind of a communal way with people. And then something happened. So, he was part of the community, but then there was this break, and nobody could get into him or to him.
Well, thanks for that incredible job you did that day at St. John's Kitchen.
Yeah.
It has lived on so vividly in my memories, and it continues to teach me and remind me and give me perspective. And I'm sure that day is unforgettable for you too. The reading of that poem must have been quite the experience.
But you're doing a podcast, and the Working Center has a newspaper, Good Work News, and the original part of Good Work News printed that poem back in 1991, and that's where we got that from. And actually, his name was not on it, but Arlene, who was coordinator of St. John's Kitchen, said, "That's Martin's poem." So that whole idea of what you're doing of capturing community history is really important.
Marshall and I are familiar with the Working Center. We know about the work that you're doing. We're going to be enlightened about more today. But what about for somebody who's tuning into our show and doesn't know what the Working Center is or has never heard of this term before? What would you say?
Well, the Working Center is many things to many people. Right now, the Working Center has this giant, complete focus on housing and homelessness and shelter. So that, and I think we'll spend some time talking about that. But when we wrote our book, Transition to Common Work, Building Community at the Working Center, we're really talking about the wider concept of the Working Center, and that was St. John's Kitchen, kind of that community that we're just talking about in relation to Martin. But it's also the Job Search Resource Center. And from the Job Search Resource Center in St. John's Kitchen are these kind of projects that emanate out of there, which go from like, Recycle Cycles, the community bike shop, Queen Street Commons, the cafe, Fresh Ground Cafe, the Green Door, boutique clothing store, the 2-acre hacienda market, the Hacienda Market Garden, which is a 2-acre market garden. We've done things like bike share, I think we call it cab. So there's all these worth a second look. The thrift store. We've renovated like 15 buildings in downtown Kitchener. We've created housing in these buildings. There's places like, the community dental clinic and the hospitality house, the Water Street house. So, the Working Center is this amalgamation of projects. It relies on commitment of individuals and the wider community to kind of make it live. For the longest time, we would have, like the first 39 years of our existence, 50% might be government money, but 30% was social enterprise money and 20% was donations. It's kind of changing right now because we're getting way more government money, which is a very different thing. But nonetheless, the community of the Working Center, is made up of 500 volunteers, 120 workers, doing really amazing stuff. And so it's kind of a social infrastructure of kind of looking after the kinds of things that help people get by, like bike shops and thrift stores. These are low, cafes with affordable coffee. These are basic things that you help people with.
And then tell us about the newspaper in the book.
Well, Good Work News, it's kind of our lifeline to the community. And we actually go up to we print 13,000 copies. We mail out to 13,000 people. The 13,000, they're really donors of the Working Center. And there's kind of a line that says a subscription is a donation to our work, and you'll never get off it once you're on, unless you move. We don't ask for another donation, but we don't even ask for donations that much, just once a year. So that's kind of that thing. Like we try to be an organism more than an organization. And that's a tricky thing. You don't have this kind of idea of a hierarchy within Working Center. I call myself the director, but that's kind of a weird name anyways, but doesn't make a lot of sense.
It's only because people look for titles, right? That you need it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then everyone else is a coordinator. Even Stephanie's role is coordinator, although she really is co-founder and she really does run everything. But we don't play those kind of games. Organizationally, we try to model something so that, and they just this morning, Stephanie was running a beautiful meeting with the shelter workers. And these are the people that are there every night supporting people and the kind of just dealing with, what's it like to have to close the door when there's someone outside who really just needs a place to sleep, even though you already have 70 people and you're only supposed to have 60, and that's the end kind of thing. But, and then all the, dealing with overdoses and all the other kinds of things, what that does to people's hearts. So it's not about hierarchy, it's about feeling and emotions and people being able to express those emotions. And so you can't do that if you create a hierarchy, but you can do that if you create a community. But people are used to a hierarchy, and you're constantly trying to learn ourselves and with others of what it means to build a community. And so Good Work News kind of tells that story. And that's what we're trying to do with Good Work News. The book tells the same story. In a, really high, it was written between, when around the time when Martin died, it took about 4 years getting all the pieces together. But it tells that story. And, there's stories like the virtues and community tools. Like we call these social enterprises community tools. And that's the bike shop and the market garden and the thrift stores and the cafes. And so what do these community tools do? Where do they come from? Why are they not just about revenue? We're not trying to make as much money off these things so we can run the Working Center. No, we're trying to build a community with our enterprise. And so it's a kind of a different way of thinking, and so we try and write about that.
When you think about where the Working Center is situated in downtown Kitchener, I think about how you're surrounded by many different kinds of businesses, and there's some residential not far by, and there's schools, and there's a market, and there's tech companies. And each of these places that people exist in, people come and go out of them in ways like there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. Some might just work there for 6 months. Some might stay there for 10 years. But you work in an environment where there are people coming in and out of your life at various times. You would have seen the end of Martin Tarbach's life, right? And there would have been some sense of closure to that. But there must be countless people who have come in and out of your life where you don't really know where they went, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's, being part of a place for 40 years is almost a little bit unique in our world these days. Kind of rooting ourselves in one place and then staying there. Because obviously there's so many opportunities to go elsewhere. We happen to have had the opportunity to just stay rooted. And so then, when one of our tenants sent, saying, hey, it's 25 years that we've been living at the Working Center at 58 Queen upstairs. I mean, there's that sense of, there's a sense of that connectedness. The other day, one of the fellows living at 66 Queen, I said, hey, he was walking up, says, let's go see these new apartments we're building. I mean, this was a fellow who taught me how to do construction. And he helped us when we renovated 43 Queen back in the late 90s. He managed that whole project. Now he's not working. He lives and he was kind of, he was never like an aggressive worker. He's just a worker who knew how to do things. And so now he's living kind of in retirement in a really low, his rent's like, $400 or something, which is a standard working center rent in kind of a bachelor apartment. And so it gives me great joy to hail him down and say, let's go look at these new apartments. Because this is, we started something back in the 90s and this is what we're doing now. And it was so great because he was thrilled by what he saw and how it was going. So to me, there's there's the relationships of the people who stick around, but then there's a lot of people who have gone, a lot of deaths, a lot of you see people don't, the people who live a street life, if they can live past 50, that's.
Yeah, I've heard it described as a death sentence if you're living on the street for too long.
Yeah, and so we really do. We know those people. I mean, we had a memorial last year for 76 people. No, when you like compared to Martin, like back then we would have maybe 10 people die a year. So with the overdose issues, that has really has gone up.
I think these numbers have changed by now, but we're at, about 1,100 people in the region. Over 400 of those people are living rough, which is what some of the stuff that you described earlier. Over 300 are living secret homelessness, which I think, I don't know the actual definition here, but I think that's probably what my mom experienced. My mom was a couch surfer for a long time, ran out of places and favors and people she could lean on. So probably something like that. More than 1,000 unique visitors eat at St. John's Kitchen every month, and 1,200 are served by the Working Center Health Services and Harm Reduction Supports. That's a lot of people, but in terms of our region, those are people you could know. It's a small amount of people when you think about the size of our region.
Right.
People
in terms
that
of 500,000 people.
We could easily help.
Totally.
And I say easily, I know that I might lose a few people on this show when I say that, but it should not be as out of reach as people seem to think that it is. We were talking to somebody yesterday who said to us, winter comes every year and the region seems, on our show, we're never out to blame and point fingers here. We're just having a conversation.
We say the same thing.
Okay. And fair to say somebody from the region is not here to defend, but winter comes every year and the region isn't prepared every year. And this year it's more visible than others because of the encampment in downtown Kitchener. So as downtown Kitchener gentrifies and the cost of living becomes unattainable for most, especially when you're talking about housing, how important is our role as citizens, but also in relationship to this new big project at 97 Victoria that y'all are working on over there. Like that's huge. That's a big one. I can't even begin to wrap my head around what's involved logistically to pull this off, but it's doable. So there's a giant bunch of ideas that's forming a question for you.
Well, there's a bunch of things that are doable, and even Working Center could doable a whole bunch of stuff, but it's not bureaucratic inertia. But it's a combination of bureaucratic inertia and political inertia, and the two actually go together. And they're not, and neither of them are mean-spirited. Neither of them are not trying their best. It's just that it's like two things that just don't join together. Like the people, we work so closely with the region's homelessness workers. They're very, they're planners and all that kind of stuff. And I know how much they care about this stuff. They want to make it happen. But the politician, it's not like you can just put a shelter anywhere. And there's a lot of concern on the part of politicians as to where things go and how that goes. And it just, months go by. And every time what happens is, it's true that it's November, you should be thinking about these things. But in September, everyone's, gee, if we go there and go there, and soon enough, it's October and no decision has been made. We've pushed the decision, to get to hopefully, I guess, by when this podcast comes out, we've really pushed to get up and running at the Schwaben Club, and I think we signed the lease yesterday. We think that we are ready to go. We're going to move in less than a week. Once from the maybe it's about 10 days from when the lease gets signed, and if Stephanie hadn't been pushing every day 10, 20 phone calls a day, it would never have happened. It would just go like that. It takes tremendous focus and knowledge to get somewhere. And so I think that's kind of what Working Center is good at. It's, maybe, I think it's kind of true. Like last year at this time, there was no option either. And we said, I did a talk at St. Andrews, and so then, the minister was kind of open, and the minister was like, "Oh, we gotta move our church," and so then, we made the presentation to the church about could we do a shelter there, and within we were open. I gave that talk the end of October. We started beginning in November, December 1st. And we, if you'd see all the renovations we did at that time, you see we got the church on board, we got the region on board. The whole thing happened. It can happen if people move, and you do need an energizer to keep doing that. The reason why we have the energizer is we just feel it viscerally. The longer story is we presented to the region and the city, the stakeholders, the Downtown Stakeholder Committee, August 2019, saying, look, there's 250 people who are homeless in downtown Kitchener who don't have a place to go. They're sleeping all over the place, and we really need to do something. And so the report we gave based on our outreach workers was because the region and city had asked that because it's obvious they're seeing it around them. They're seeing it in the encampments. And not much happened. November 11th, during a snowstorm 2019, the day before at church at St. Mary's, we asked Father Toby, think we could come in? We need an answer. And there's no answer, and there's a snowstorm. It's going to be like a week of really cold weather. Let's just do this. And he went along with our boldness, I guess you'd say. And we, for 2 weeks, it was a crazy place, but 250 different people, about 125 people a night were sleeping in the basement of St. Mary's. It was a beautiful show of solidarity on the part of the church, and also the wider St. John's Kitchen and Shelter community that came together to make that happen. With no resources, we just made it happen. The region did contribute to it over time. And then, we ended up at the Tim Hortons after that, and at the vacant Tim Hortons at Frederick and Lancaster. And then, but not... Some of the region did open the St. Mark's shelter with the Y finally near the end of the month. But the real issue just wasn't going away. So, with the pandemic, at St. John's Kitchen, we had, at that gas station and in our parking lot, we had 30, 50 people who were camping. So this was right. So then you go a year later, it's October or August 2020, and we have all these people camping on our property. And the region did come up with, because of the pandemic, WCRI, Waterloo, it's the Waterloo Co-op housing, student housing. Their oldest residence, the Hammer residence, was empty. There's 80 beds. Region agreed to rent it. We went there, near the third week of August. We had people in there October 1st. And so we've had 80 people in there ever since. And that was the group. The group, they were either in motels or that we were supporting or camping out at St. John's Kitchen. And we filled that place. And so that's kind of action that's necessary. And it is possible to do those kinds of things.
We're going to take a moment to hear from this episode's sponsors, some of our favorite businesses in town.
Bonn Park is supported by Artline Salon. Artline is not like any salon you've ever seen. To truly get what Artline is about, you have to experience the experience. So whether you're looking for a subtle change or ready to debut a dazzling new look, Artline will work with you to create a masterpiece.
Artline is located in Belmont Village in Kitchener. You can call 519-585-0230 or visit them online at artlinesalon.com. They're also on Instagram. This holiday season, Artline Salon is running a campaign to raise food and funds for the food bank of Waterloo Region. If you stop by their salon, they've got all the boxes there. You can donate funds, like we said, or you can donate some items from their high needs list: canned fruit, vegetables, meat, fish, dry beans and pasta, hot and cold cereal, individually packed snacks, jams, spreads, peanut butter, and rice. So again, check that out at Artline Salon. The Food and Funds campaign at Artline will run from now until January 31st, 2023. Please support by donating one or more of those items that we mentioned, or stop by and donate some funds.
We are supported by Clean and Tidy Cleaning Services.
Clean and Tidy is all about making life a little bit easier and a little less stressful for their clients. Serving Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, and surrounding areas, Clean and Tidy offers both residential and commercial cleaning services using safe, natural, and green products. In addition to cleaning and dusting, the Clean and Tidy crew will also fulfill requests like making beds, washing and folding laundry, and vacuuming furniture. Visit cleanandtidykw.com and book a free consultation. We are supported by Herb and Good Family Funeral Home.
They've been big supporters of Bonn Park since the beginning of our podcast. As the area's longest-serving family funeral home, Herb and Good has helped people in Waterloo Region through difficult times over the past 77 years and have the experience and flexibility to exceed your expectations. The caring staff, family ownership, personal guidance facilities, and reasonable prices have become the hallmark of their service. They are steeped in tradition. Herb and Good Family Funeral Home is located at 171 King Street South in Waterloo, or visit herbgood.com. Bonn Park is supported by Heartbeat Hot Sauce.
Ooh, I love Heartbeat Hot Sauce. All of Heartbeat sauces are made with maximum flavor and balance in mind. They've got a range of flavors, including red habanero, jalapeno, pineapple habanero, blueberry habanero, piri-piri, and a scorching scorpion pepper sauce. Visit them at heartbeathotsauce.com and follow them on Instagram and Facebook. Treat your tongue to some exciting new flavors that will raise your heartbeat. We are supported by the ever-delicious Vincenzo's.
Over the past 5 decades, Vincenzo's has become one of Waterloo Region's most beloved sources of delicious food. Vincenzo's has fresh produce, pastas, sauces, deli meats, cheeses, and a huge selection of oils, vinegars, sauces, and hot sauce. You can have your perfect sandwich custom made with any combination of cheeses, meats, sauces, and breads. Visit Vincenzo's at the Bauer Building on the corner of Allen and Caroline Streets in Waterloo, or online at vincenzosonline.com. And now, back to our show. My earliest memory of the working center is, it might have been 1990, and I might have been 19 years old, and I was told you can go down to the working center if you're looking for work. And there was something called Kelly's Temporary Services, where they help find women work in the community, or manpower, right? Lots of jobs that require steel-toed boots, right? And I remember going in, and they ask you a few questions, and then maybe they'll find work for you. But I also remember not having a full understanding of what the working center was, and it looked like it was trying to meet many different needs. Yeah. And there were people in there who looked like they were in a much rougher situation than I was. Yeah. And we're talking about 1990, right? Is there any part of that still looks like that today, or does the working center just keep evolving and changing with a city that just keeps booming in size?
That's it's interesting.
Am I accurate in describing it?
I think you're 100% accurate. Yeah. We were told during those years, well, you should move out away from the downtown, because as long as you open up, you're downtown, you open up. Like we learned in 1983 when we ran what we called Unemployed Worker Center at St. John's Church. I was not much older than you when you came to the Working Center in 1990. We were just graduated from university. Didn't know a lot, but we quickly saw, wow, that's the group that is, we didn't use the word homeless, but they were not part of the labor market. And, they came for a coffee every morning because they didn't have work. And their chances of work were not really high. Of course, this was a time of high unemployment. We were at 12% unemployment when the Working Center opened. And so there's a different kind of mentality about the meaning of work. But we always chose, as an organization, hospitality. So we would say, no, we're not. We looked at those organizations that all moved away from the downtown, different, in Oshawa and Windsor and St. Catharines. There were groups that were doing this kind of work that we were well connected with. No, we said, no, we're downtown. I mean, our people, we serve this group at St. John's Kitchen. We're gonna serve them at the Working Center, but that made for kind of it didn't make for the most efficient looking job search resource center. We maybe gave people mixed messages, but we believed in the message of community. And fact is, resource center, job search resource center, 3,000 people a year get support from that resource center. We've lived through it. Now it's a resource center for new Canadians, honestly. It's a beautiful thing to walk in there. And you don't see as many of the group like you would have seen. You see, what's kind of changed in our economy is that group who went to St. John's Kitchen, say, in the 1980s, they still believed they could get work. They just were not able to be part of the labor market. But they believed in work because that's where they came from. And so they would come to the resource center for trying to find work, even though maybe their chances were not so great, and maybe they had a drinking problem as part of it, and there were all kinds of issues there. Now that group is so alienated from work, they don't even have a reason to come to the resource center. And to me, that's kind of sad.
That is, yeah.
Yeah, this is part of the bigger issue about the meaning of work and what kind of work people do. And the people who get left out of work now are so marginalized, they'll take drugs over work. And it's not because they take drugs over work, it's that drugs substitute for work. Drugs substitute meaning for work rather than society creating meaningful work.
Or have you met many people? I'm going to describe a busker I knew years ago named Mojo. Yeah. Maurice Duran, he's passed on. He'd be thrilled to be part of this podcast because he absolutely loved it when I wrote about him in the Waterloo Chronicle.
Right.
And Mojo and I sat down at St. John's Kitchen one time, and on the blackboard where they write messages, it says, "Not all who wander are lost." And he said, "I think that's me." He said, "I genuinely love playing my music." He goes, "I'm not a panhandler. I'm a busker, right?
Yeah.
I get enough money thrown in my case all year round. I go buy my meals. I
live simply."
Yeah, and I think that I don't know how many folks you would have met over the years like Mojo who just simply, Mojo had some place to sleep, or in the summer sometimes slept outside, and he seemed like okay, and he took great joy in entertaining passersby.
Yeah, it's a large percentage of the people who are part of the St. John's Kitchen community. And not so much the group, once they find out that they really can't work in the regular labor market, they start to create they create a new narrative, like this fellow Mojo. But I could name hundreds of people that create that narrative for themselves. And it's a decent narrative if they can contribute back to society. And many do. Like music is a way to contribute back. And, every one of them would think they do. And they do, actually. Because when you tear underneath and understand how they live their life each day, there's some good stuff that goes on. So it's right now, some of that is being undermined by the realities of drugs, and realities of the kind of drugs. So it is a kind of a different world, but we were very comfortable in that world you're just describing. That was so much of the working center. So many of our volunteers were that group, that would spend 2 or 3 days a week at Worth a Second Look doing, sorting people's junk, and helping to recycle it. I mean, that's community work. I always felt, I think we've lost our understanding of what community work means, and that's core to the working center message.
You've mentioned it a few times, but yeah, just like how scary the drug problem is. I mean, so obviously you've 40 years been at this work, and the landscape of what the cities and the region's needs are changes drastically over the decades. And just what has that looked like for you?
Well, it's pretty recent. We noticed, around here, like 2015, 2014, like something really major changed. It's interesting that, say, 2013, when the Out of the Colds in our town closed, it was somewhat related to the growing drug issue. And because the drugs make people do really crazy things, it was a very hard environment for these different church volunteer groups to manage. And so there was some understanding. But when the region did a little bit of studying, it seemed like there was only about 40 people who really needed support. And so then, Working Center had a fundraising campaign, and we built 17 units focused on the most long-term homeless. And we thought, this was 2014, we thought that was going to make a difference. But underneath, we saw these drugs were kind of taking shape. And if you remember, the 47 Weber property, it's a beautiful old building, and there's that landlord, I can't think of his name, who really had abandoned the building. He owned it, probably bought it for a song. He wasn't looking after it, but there was well over a good 100 people were squatting in that building, and underneath all that was this drug issue was really percolating. And so now that I've understood and so all of a sudden, that's when the homelessness numbers started growing. And now we're at a number that's like 1,000. And it's real. And I think it does go back to what's happened with drugs. So what's happened with drugs is a story that it's really what happens with capitalism. And I almost have to use the example of the chicken McNugget. It's not my example, but I heard it from Sam Keenon's describing it. And, he says, the chicken McNugget, it's 50% fat. It was a product that someone made, and, it's really gross how it's made. And then they dip it in more fat, and then they fry it, and then they serve it with sugar. And so, like, all the addictive, focused effort to make a product that's cheap, that's addictive, and that's well distributed. Well, that's just what's happened. Like, that's capitalism. That's what we call capitalism at its best. But it's also what the drug system has done. So, like, what used to be cocaine, and heroin that came from from poppy seeds and cocoa leaf, now is done by molecules. And this happened not in the 1990s. Like, crack cocaine thing, that was all based on, cocaine that came from a leaf. Slowly in the 2000s, but really marked turn around 2010, all this stuff is done by molecules. And people have figured out, how to make fentanyl or how to make this meth. Like, meth was being made with ephedrine. And then ephedrine was banned by around 2012, I think. And even like it was being made like with tons of ephedrine coming from somewhere into Mexico and then turning into meth and then shipped into North America. But ephedrine was banned because it was an obvious thing that you could stop. But now meth is made with some like lye and hydrochloric acid, like really very toxic substances. So it's called the process is called P2P meth, and anyone can make it. It's made in Canada, and it's made in the States, made in China, or made in Mexico, and it's like industrialized production. Because people are doing really well because you can distribute it, and it's not being it's being distributed by gangs, but it's being distributed by small business people. Like it doesn't seem it's not really it's gang like, but there's as many small business people, and if you and I mean small business in that an entrepreneurial sense, like someone's in a house, they can't afford anything, they think, hey, I can make 100,000, and they find a way to get some of these molecules, and they go for it. And that's, if you read if you kind of watch who's being busted, that's kind of what you see. But what's happened? There's an opioid thing was going on as well, and the opioid stuff is the OxyContin and how much of that was so pushed on so much of society. Now that's lessened, but there's these deep opioid addictions. And how do people deal with that? The easy access to fentanyl. And fentanyl kills, but fentanyl also gives a great high, and it does, it's a very efficient molecule. It's a very, very small molecule, easy to transport. And so what's happened is there's two drugs have won. It's sort of like Facebook and Google or something. Like, our societies are winner take all, and now we have fentanyl and meth, and now they're combined together, and that seems like there's no other drugs around. There isn't, like, people aren't doing heroin anymore. No one's doing crack cocaine much. We don't see that. Everything is meth and fentanyl, and it's relatively cheap from what I understand. So, and well distributed, and highly addictive, well distributed, and destructive of individuals' psyche. And I just want to read this from Sam Kinnon. The new way relies on combinations of widely available legal industrial chemicals. And this is what has allowed meth supplies we're seeing. This meth has been accompanied by scary, rapid onset symptoms of schizophrenia, florid hallucinations, and severe paranoia, and thus homelessness. Sam Kinons, he kind of sees, like, is it a drug problem or a homelessness problem? And it's really it's right on the edge. Sometimes I think it's a drug problem more than a homelessness problem, because once someone is totally addicted to that meth, we see them. They don't make any sense. You see these people on the street. They're not your old busker who was living, he could maybe do a little bit of alcohol, maybe even a little bit of drugs, but he could hold his life together. This group, you can see it. Look at the mess of those encampments. Any place that, those encampments look like the Russian army, like these big messes everywhere. It makes no sense.
And for those experiencing homelessness over a period of time, where is their money coming from that they can continue a habit like that?
What a great question.
That's a good question.
For the women, it's not a hard question. And that's what's really tragic.
And some of the men, I assume, as well.
Yeah. Some of the men. And it's really sad. And there's a big percentage of that. But still, then the same question is, where does the money come from? The money, this is, again, Sam Kinnon's book. In the States, I don't know about Canada, but I'm pretty sure it's similar here. Walmart, we all dislike Walmart for what it did to Main Street, but you have no idea how productive it was to the drug economy. The OxyContin came in like 30 milligrams and 50 milligrams. And in different parts of Ohio and Indiana, Kentucky, that 30 milligram it was $1 a milligram, or $1 a milligram. So a 30 milligram pill was worth $30. If you wanted something so you'd have to go to Walmart and steal $60 pants, which would then be discounted 50% to get your 30 milligram pill. So what happened was like a giant thieving ring based on, like there's a Walmart every 20 kilometers. And people, Walmart wasn't worrying about receipts, and they had old people, doing the greeting thing. And it was, the stories are really quite unbelievable. I could imagine, like Walmart obviously was hiding it in their statements. They're not going to say, well, if 20% of our produce is stolen, that's not good for business. But in fact, that's what was going on. So I'm saying that the drug economy finds, when we talk about stealing is part of the drug economy. And it's not good. It's good. It is really bad for the human spirit. This is like the worst kind of situation we have of a society that's so false among itself that its lowest individuals, the individuals most pressed by the realities that they're dealing with, are faced with needing these drugs and then having to steal for them. And they steal among themselves, they steal among other people, and they do really nefarious things.
So if that one pill before cost $30, you had said that the fentanyl and meth is crazy cheap. Like, what is that now costing someone?
I don't know the number. I really don't know the numbers.
But it's still doable.
Yeah.
It's, it's not $500 or whatever.
You see, you do get really different things.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll hear $10. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you'll hear $50.
Right.
I don't really know that answer.
Okay. That's okay.
There are drugs in the drugstores that I know are being carefully controlled, monitored, because something I would take sometimes is pseudoephedrine, which is just something found in cold medicine.
Yes.
And rather than buy a full cold medicine, just buy some pseudoephedrine. And it's great for your congestion in the spring for your allergies. Yeah. Well, you can't get that on the counter anymore. Now you have to go, and the pharmacist will give you one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nobody's going to walk out of there with 5 of them, right?
Yeah, because that's what meth was made out of. That was the ephedrine meth was formerly made out of.
For those,
it was actually better made out of that than what the lye that they're using now.
On any given Saturday here in Waterloo Region, if I was to boot around the city with my family in the car, I might see possibly up to 10 folks with their cardboard signs on busy intersections asking for change, right? That number used to be way smaller years ago. But I also think about how those folks, I'm not sure. So I always think to get to a point where you're going to grab a piece of cardboard and a Sharpie and make a sign, on that day you've resigned to the idea, this is how I'm going to make a few bucks today, right?
But it's only for the drugs, though.
Yeah.
It's 100%
100% for the drugs? Yeah.
I think so.
Well, but tomorrow's not going to look any different for them. I always wonder. Yeah, I always wonder what it's like to work in a space and with people around you where you're coming face to face with citizens in our community who basically have resigned to the idea that tomorrow could be a better day. They just must, as I think we talked, or Carol Tarback talked about this to bring this full circle at Martin's service, is Martin felt powerless to help his situation. Is that where things are at with a lot of people you meet?
Well, the drugs these present day drugs make it way worse than ever. So the sense of resignation among 1,000 people is so high compared to the sense of resignation of 40 or 70 people 20 years ago. So like the sense of resignation was low back then. Like there was still, Martin's a good example. Like he still could not move. Like there wasn't that much, but he was never violent. He didn't live in a violent culture. He wasn't protecting his drug supply, and like he wasn't having to grasp for money in order to feed his habit. Like there wasn't that desperation. So now you have 1,000 people with exactly that desperation, and that's the amazing work that the working center outreach workers and workers at St. John's Kitchen and the shelter are doing every day. Other groups are doing it too. I'm just talking about what I know, how our group is dealing with that. It's really difficult. It's really harsh work.
From hearing you talk about, Stephanie making these relentless calls, trying to get support and move things forward, like how can someone listening to Bonn Park this episode today, how can they help?
The work that Stephanie would do is kind of unique in her knowledge of all the players. So that's a pretty specialized kind of role that she can uniquely do, and is bold enough to do it. The wider call for volunteers, it's been kind of unique in the last couple weeks. Some really amazing quality individuals have stepped up in a whole bunch of ways that we've been kind of missing because of the pandemic. And like this one woman who we know, she's going to be able to start the dental clinic back up. And another woman is helping us get some stuff around the Water Street House project. And another fella is helping us with the logistics around the moving of Worth a Second Look and Recycle Cycles as part of the new building project. And then, the perimeter development, stepping up and like literally holding our hand to do this big project, the 97 Victoria project. And another fella who, I met last week, we could build 50, the region does have maybe a spot for another tiny, better tent city place. We could build those things, I bet you, we'd build the 50 cabins in like a week. Like, just tell us when and we're ready to go. So like, people are stepping up, and this guy I know, he would organize it in a minute. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot to be done.
So is the call to action, I guess I should call it, for anyone listening, like just get in touch with the Working Center and just say, here's the skill I have. Yeah. How can I help you?
Yeah, Working Center is uniquely designed to develop that. Sometimes we frustrate people. I'm not saying we're perfect in any way, but I think we have so many examples of individuals with truly unique skills that come in and do great things.
In the real life, you have many years of work ahead, much work ahead of you. But let's say it was wrapping up right now.
Talking about me personally?
Yeah.
Oh.
Can you
hypothetically?
Can you look? Yeah. Can you look back on those decades and just feel incredible gratification for that incredibly important work you did all these years, and know that it was good, important work? And also, I guess my other question is, were you unwavering through it all, or were there times where you just kind of go, "Oh, is any of this helping?"
When we first started, I remember, Father Norm Choate at St. Jerome's, he says, well, you do these kind of things for 5 years and then you go do something real kind of thing. Boy, sound like my father. But by the 10th year, we were pretty committed. We saw community, we saw the potential of community, we saw the potential of the community tools, we saw the potential of our knowledge, that we could buy buildings and fix them up and involve people. And then, people have recognized that, and, we feel so very gratified that the Working Center community has grown and the community has recognized that. Through donations, through participation, through all kinds of things. So we actually haven't, like Stephanie and I would both say, we've never felt like we're really changing. We're just going to keep going. And and now it's so big we don't have a choice. So we actually work more. Like my mother's really, had a major fall kind of thing, and she's in the hospital. in 2000 in the 1990s, I could be with her when she was in the hospital. Oh my gosh, I'm not sure I can't do that right now. And I would have thought I'd be able to have more time. But we actually find that as we've gotten, the organization is more complex. We have to be even more attentive, which is kind of unfortunate. So that we haven't, it's just a feeling of gratitude that it's a beautiful community and we need to keep feeding it. Jane Jacobs said, if you don't feed a cow, it dies. If you don't feed the cow is going to die. It's just that we got like 25 cows now, and they all need feeding. Well, it's a really exciting project. Something really unique. David Gibson from Perimeter Development, he's befriended us because he bought the Walper. He said, I got to find out who this working center is because I'm sharing the street with all these working center buildings. and so we got to know David and his wife. And then, so when this housing crisis was coming on, this is 2018 or so. Yeah, 2019, actually. We asked David to help us think about this. And he said, I'm going to bring my retired architect. And we went and looked at all the working center properties, and then he said, and some other ideas, and he said, nope, this is where we need to do this. And so then Joe Bogdan conceptualized drawings, and then he met with our working center workers, and we played around with ideas, and then the housing project started developing. So during the pandemic, we were kind of working away at it, and then so that's when we in May or June of this year, we announced this new 97 Victoria project. We call it Making Home, and it's putting 44 units of housing on the second and third floor of 97 Victoria. So we're going to build a third floor, and then we're going to remake St. John's Kitchen in kind of the parking lot where formerly the Worth a Second Look parking lot was. And it's going to be a beautiful, really striking building, community space, and there'll be a courtyard, and it'll be the entrance to St. John's, or to the housing right there. So whereas 97 or St. John's Kitchen kind of goes all around the property, now it's going to kind of be focused in the middle of the property, and that'll kind of work better for the neighborhood. And the 44 units are very communal. They're kind of designed more like the units that at University Avenue, very small units. There'll be washrooms, but more communal food. And we believe in communal food because that's where the relationships build rather than separate in small rooms. And we're going to build this housing, and then we'll recreate St. John's Kitchen in a new way. And it's really going to remake the space. It's an expensive project. I think we said it's like 19 million, but 6 million of that is because the working center owns all that land, and because of land development, yes, say 6 million is the land, but we own that already, so it's not really a cost. So 19 minus 6 is
13.
13. Thank you.
I was guessing.
So
Joe.
yeah, well, that was good. Took me long to get that. We have to raise. A big part of that will be this rapid housing initiative money. Which could be like up to 8 million. And that makes sense. That's kind of the numbers for 44 units. And then we have to raise the rest. We got a beautiful surprise as we were planning this. And it was just like this March. And David Gibson and Craig Beatty said, we want to have a Zoom call with you, just talk about the project. And they told us they were going to donate $1 million. So not only has Perimeter helped us, walked us through, got all these plans. They've used all their connections for all the engineering studies and all the process, the planning process. And they've used all their connections to leverage to make that project come to fruition. They said they'd contribute $1 million on top of that in real cash. So that's going to make our fundraising much better. But that was so beautiful.
Bonn Park is made possible with the support of the Kitchener Public Library and the Kitchener-Waterloo Community Foundation.
Our show is produced by Sarah Geidlinger,
And Marshall Ward.
with audio engineering by Sarah Geidlinger.
Bonn Park's original music is by Alan Lung. Harry, you still with us? We want to tell you about a fun project that we have. Are you ready?
Yeah.
We have another podcast called An Unscripted Spectacle, Wrestling with Wrestling. Here's Colin Hunter of Kayfabe News to tell you all about it.
Welcome to An Unscripted Spectacle, Wrestling with Wrestling. I'm Colin Hunter from Kayfabe News. Marshall is utterly obsessed with professional wrestling. Sarah is utterly perplexed by professional wrestling. On each episode of An Unscripted Spectacle, Marshall and Sarah talk with a different guest from the world of wrestling. Promoters, referees, journalists, and current and past stars of the Squared Circle to talk deeply about the strange magic of professional wrestling that has enchanted Marshall his whole life. Can they turn Sarah into a fellow connoisseur of professional wrestling? She'll need some convincing.
I find out who Jimmy Corderas is. Who the heck are you?
Oh, well, that's a good question. For those who don't know, I spent the better part of over 2 decades working in WWF/WWE, mostly as a referee inside the ring.
I have the honor of meeting the magnificent LuFisto. I heard that you were described as the first lady of hardcore. I've just recently found out what hardcore is.
Yeah, thanks to Madman Pondo.
When I've learned that I was going to be inducted, it was like, it is now my time to tell the story of women's wrestling. Because so many times I've heard, oh, this is the first time this happens in women's wrestling history. And I'm like, no.
I learned all about the storytelling and writing process from Tom Casiello.
Yeah, I was in soap operas for 14 years. I was at Young and the Restless last. That was from 2009 to 2011. And so I thought, I'll go in for the interview. I'll be honest with them. If I blow it, I blow it. Not the end of the world. And I was there for 6 years. And I rose up the ranks to managing lead writer. And it was the most insane time period of my entire life.
I got a new skincare regime from RJ City. Checking out your hair, and I wish that mine looked like yours. You have beautiful locks.
Thank you. The secret, this isn't a plug, it feels like an endorsement, is aloe vera. I have it here. I put it on my skin. I put it in my hair. I use the gel. I put a couple drops of peppermint in.
I have a plant right there on my
Good.
fridge.
Cut it open, squeeze it out, and put it, honestly, wherever you want. It's good for you.
I find out that Colt Cabana is just famous enough that he can still buy groceries. And Tyson Kidd tells me all about the people's elbow. Who knew?
Basically comes to a complete stop, then brings his leg over the guy like he's going to do a leg drop. But the leg like keeps circling past the guy, and then he drops an elbow on the guy.
Oh, and the elbow represents like all the people of the fans? Like he's been voted, he's going to drop this elbow?
Well, like he started calling himself the people's champion, and then that move just became the people's elbow.
And then there's also, as you know, there's the people's strudel.
Yeah. I mean, there's the people's eyebrow. There's a lot of the people. Got a lot of people.
So check out An Unscripted Spectacle, Wrestling with Wrestling. Available anywhere you get your podcasts.